I'm I'm your host for this because I have a history with both of these guys. I'll start with Pat over here. I used to work with him on Almost Live and at King TV, circa 19... Oh, all right. Thank you. All right. Okay, you're not here. So, yes, worked with Pat at Almost Live at King for a couple of years, and then fast forward to around 2010, 11. Bryan became my intern. He was a student at Big Picture High School, just down the road. Thank you, Highline Public Schools. So I was Bryan's mentor for about 4, 5 years. Anyway, could have been 10. It felt like 10. So now here I am. I'm here to do a Q&A with them. So I will start with the man of the hour, Mr. Bryan Shickley. Bryan, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about your project?
I'm Bryan Shickley. I think I failed every opportunity that life's given me up until I met Mr. Scott Schaefer and Mr. Pat Cashman over here. Just never really got around to doing much animation work, and I went to school for it. And then after that, found no job opportunities and said, I'm going to do this for me, and I'm going to do this for some piece of history. And I got really, really hyper-focused on Fred Crisman, and so did these two.
Yes, he did a great job, didn't he? And we'll get to his workflow in a moment. But now let's, the voice of Meat Puppet, what is it? Meat Sack Crisman. What's your name again?
Fred Crisman. Yeah. By way of introduction, I got a call, I guess it was a text, from this guy, and I said, that sounds like fun. I was just in the middle of completing my first book, and it was doing so well. In fact, the book is in its 3rd printing now, happy to say. It's selling so well that we're gonna actually print our 4th copy next week. It's a self-help relationships kind of book. Look for it. Women are from Mercer Island, men are from Kent. So I just completed the book, and I heard from him, and I said, that sounds like fun. Got involved, really didn't know, I'd never heard of Fred Crisman, but that was okay, he'd never heard of me either. So we plowed into this thing, and I did the voices at my house, but I didn't really know what it was gonna look like. He's described it well, but it was a surprise, and this tonight is the first time I actually have seen the entire episode.
Isn't he a natural? Pat, you have an amazing voice, and people cheered when they heard your voice. Did you notice that? I did.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So why don't you talk a little about how you connected with Mr. Cashman?
Okay, I have this special computer in my program that all the Hollywood elites use called Gmail. So I had written 3 scripts. One was about D.B. Cooper. I forget the other one. It must have mattered if I don't remember it. And I wrote one about Crisman 5-6 years ago when we watched, a buddy and I, Paul, watched the Maury Island incident. And we said, what doesn't work about this? And the biggest issue gets to be filming locations and getting actors. And when you have Pat can work from home. And Pat loves to work from home. That's the only time I've ever seen him work. I said, Dear Mr. Cashman, I'm sending this to you and a few other people. If you do it, no one else is gonna do it. And it's a story about a real guy from Tacoma who not only was portrayed in the Maury Island movie, but he was also involved with the Kennedy assassination. And you can look all this up. And I was like, Pat, read about this, read about that. And he goes, it's a cartoon? I love cartoons! And he was so excited to do it that he actually gave me his phone number. And at the time that was like, oh, big Hollywood star giving me a phone number.
Yeah, that's great. What a great story. I'm so happy these two connected. They're just a natural, and I think they've got a great project. So let's talk a little about you. How did you get into the zone of Crisman?
Well, first of all, as he just alluded, Fred Crisman was a real person. He's not around anymore. And passed away some years ago, actually. But so that's the predicate for it. This is a real person. It's not, we're just not clear on all of his veracity, shall we say. Now, it's true that he was a pilot. I mean, that part was real. He really did. What happened after that, we don't know for sure. He swears that everything he said was true. And if you read about him on the internet, somebody wrote a great Wikipedia page about him. Real guy, but real complicated at the same time. And so I think from what Crisman's told people, Bryan just decided to make what was a story of some questionable, as I said, veracity, and it seemed credible. I think making it into a cartoon was a great idea, because then you could just enjoy it if you like cartoons like I do. We were talking the other day, Bryan and I were, I don't know how many people are as old as I am that are in this room. There's a couple of people outside of this room that I know are older. But when I was a kid, I watched a cartoon series called Clutch Cargo. Does anybody remember that? It was the crappiest animation possible. And nothing moved, except they wiped in a guy's real mouth to talk. And so that is what I pictured. I'd say what?
Gave me nightmares.
Yeah, because it wasn't just the guy's mouth, it was wet, looked like a piece of liver, and so that gave me nightmares too. So that's what I thought this cartoon would look like. It turns out to be much cooler, and maybe you can explain how they do this, because you know, if you grew up on Disney films, these Disney animators painstakingly went through cell by cell, frame by frame to do these animations. Not as arduous today. How do you do it?
Well, so in about 99, computers took over the animation industry. And I don't just mean Pixar and Toy Story. Doing a drawing every 24th of a second used to mean you had a big piece of celluloid. You would paint on it the line work. And then when you're done painting it, you send it all the way overseas to Korea, and they painstakingly paint every individual 24th of a second. I didn't have money for that. And I was starting to think, like the basic drawing tablet they used to make The Simpsons starts at about $4,000. And it's like, how many of you guys can afford that? So I said, screw this, I'm gonna do it all on an iPad and see how an iPad can actually handle a comic book. If you look at TV now, especially animation like The Simpsons, it's drawn by hand, it's drawn on a computer, but the line work is so clean and precise, and there's no cell shadows. They used to stack the cells together and they would cast these beautiful shadows that separate the characters from the background. It's kind of like if you ever watched SpongeBob, you could tell if they were going to grab something off a shelf because it was sticking out a foot in front of everything else. So anyway, what I did is half of it's rotoscope. If you ever see Ralph Bakshi movies, he did Heavy Metal, he did I think the 70s, 80s Lord of the Rings adaptions. And so a lot of this was live action that my friend Joel did, where he's running through a grocery store aisle, because that's what we had. And then I would just painstakingly, one at a time, draw over it on an iPad, color it on the iPad, and then send it to the computer for Pat to do the voices on it. And how do I say this without sounding full of myself? I think it looks a lot more pen and ink and organically drawn than a lot of TV right now. I don't think it's better drawn, but I actually went in and added shadows and film grain, and I wanted you to feel a little bit like you were still in the 70s.
It really is amazing, and I've seen him work on the iPad, and he is a genius. And you use obviously the Apple Pencil version 406, and so he's able to do the whole thing on the iPad, correct? And what software do you use again?
It's called Procreate. I was just thinking about Clutch Cargo. In Clutch Cargo, the kid is one of the first examples of a little boy being played by a woman. And there's an episode where she forgot to take her lipstick off. So the little kid's wearing lipstick. It's adorable.
Sounds like a scene in your next episode, perhaps. So, Pat, talk a little about your workflow. So you get the script by email, I presume, and then you just do what? What happens?
In a sense, his animation is at least bordering on something you've been hearing a lot about, AI. He luckily has not heard about that yet, or I wouldn't have that gig either. They can do voices, and it's going to put the voice actors out of work eventually, I suppose. But not yet. And I know this is indulgent of me, but I just recorded 2 days ago a commercial, and I still have the script with me. I'd like to share it with you. You've seen those commercials on TV, and you've heard them on radio for pharmaceutical products, where they spend about, if it's a minute-long commercial, they spend the first 10 seconds telling you how great it is. And then the balance of the commercial is telling you, don't take it. These are the side effects. So this is one of those commercials, just recorded it. You'll hear this. There would be probably a plaintive piano music playing underneath this, because it's pretty serious stuff. I don't know when I first noticed it, but something didn't feel right. So I went to my doctor, and that's when he said the words I hoped I would never hear. Galbrophonosoplasia. I couldn't believe I was hearing that word, galbrophonosoplasia, but it scared me, and my doctor didn't really say what it was. It had me worried, but that's when my doctor recommended Phenestrine DL. Within just a few days, my original symptoms were gone and were replaced by a hacking cough and a ringing in my ears and severe itching. So I went back to my doctor, and that's when he recommended Floccotate Barazone. Within a few hours, the ringing in my ears and the itching had disappeared and were replaced by a hacking cough, runny eyes, and skin eruptions. So I went back to my doctor, and that's when he told me about Hexachloride Paradigm 2000. I seem to tolerate Hexachloride Paradigm 2000 quite well, but I found the taste very nauseating. That's when my doctor told me that Hexachloride Paradigm 2000 was an ointment. And he told me to stop eating it and switched me to once a day low sodium, high magnesium Chlorisflar AB. Within just a few short hours, I was bleeding from the ears and eyes and was experiencing severe tremors and crushing chest pains. That's when my doctor recommended Mutterschmeal Traconazole, a 2-foot-long suppository. And that, Your Honor, is why I shot my doctor. That's a commercial I just recorded. Thank you. But it's really cool to hear your voice on a cartoon. I mean, it's great to show off to your kids, or in my case too, my grandkids. It gives you a kind of cred that you would never otherwise have. So I thank you for that, Bryan.
So that was really funny. Pat's still doing bits. I love it. I just want to say, personally, you are one of my comedy heroes. You should have been on Saturday Night Live. You are one of the most talented and consistently funny, yet very humble and very real human. And we love you, Pat. And it's such an honor to be seeing you again. And I just love to hear his voice. I mean, it's comforting. So you better get AI to duplicate, to clone you, perhaps. And stop eating the cream. You're supposed to put it on your open sores, like we saw in the film. So then, Bryan, tell us more about the upcoming Crisman.
The upcoming Crimson.
Are you the voice of the Darrows?
I am the voice of half of the Darrows. My friend Paul McDonald is the other half. And it came, I gotta tell this story. When COVID hit, oh, you're gonna laugh. When COVID hit, we were watching, I think, like Japanese local TV. That's all my friend can get because they don't have like a cable package. And it said that scientists are turning to remdesivir. The hell is remdesivir? And Paul looks over and goes, scientists have moved over to black magic in order to figure out how to stop this COVID thing. And then at the same time, we did the Emperor voice from Star Wars and went, remdesivir. And we realized remdesivir is a god from another planet, and or dimension, if you will. But he would be, you know, if you say his name backwards, he disappears, he melts. But he's the kind of guy who would try to tell you a riddle in order to get something he wants, and it would turn into like, what gets wetter as it dries a tower? Fuck! And remdesivir never could quite make it out of the neighborhood. He would be like a low budget. You ever see Suburban Commando or that He-Man movie? They could only afford to shoot in like one block of LA. And we were just kicking that voice over and over. And we read the Crisman thing. There's another story I got out of that. We were reading about Crisman while walking down the streets of Normandy Park at like 2 in the morning because we're just a bunch of weirdos. And we start reading, oh look, there's not leaked, but given out government documents about Crimson. What is this all about? And then something hit him on the face. Literally, am I tripping? We weren't, I promise. Am I tripping? Is this a spider web? And I was like, that can't be right. And then I started walking forward and a spider web just crossed right here. And we just looked over at each other and we turned back home. And then another spider web hit us and another, and they're onto us. And what we found out is that the ending of Charlotte's Web is real, and spiders actually do get around by casting webs out. And we just happen to be caught in this magical spider rain. And we're like, that we got to do this now. What were we talking about?
The next episode that we saw the trailer for.
Oh, see, what I did was the prequel episode. We wrote 10 scripts. Pat's recorded 10 scripts for me out of the kindness of his heart and the goodness of my wallet. But the next one is the Maury Island. There were 3 key events. It was the Encounter in the Caves, which you can look up. It's an amazing stories. It's the June 1943 issue, I believe. Encounter in the Caves. Second thing he did is 2 years later, I believe, when he started talking about UFOs, and it led into the Maury Island incident, which may or may not have been, how do I say this nicely? Crisman either had horrible tragedies occur to him, or he ran the coolest insurance scam I've ever seen in my entire life. Because they really did run the boat ashore when they saw the ships. I don't know what other reason you would run a boat ashore, but maybe he could have had one. And it gets very strange. I read the book, I recommend the book, The Coming of the Saucers, which is the biography of Kenneth Arnold, the guy who first saw UFOs. And then he called Amazing Stories and they said, oh, we got this guy from Seattle who saw UFOs too, why don't you go visit him? And it turned into this crazy adventure, which I was really bummed did not get represented by Scott's film, because if they do another one, I bet you could shoot it in 2 locations. I bet you could.
Oh yeah, the Winthrop Hotel.
The Winthrop Hotel, which I have been to and told never to come back. I filmed it for a Crisman documentary that I'm doing, if you're wondering why you're on camera. And I got pointed at while there was a cop there, and I saw an old man go. So I think he's part of the Darrows cover-up as well. So this is going to cover Scott's bit. It's probably 5 minutes of the actual Maury Island. 5 minutes of the story will be what you saw in the first Maury Island movie there. And the rest is actually about the Man in Black, who comes from a man named John Keel or a man named Albert Bender, depending on history. They were both major sci-fi guys. And I just want to talk about Crisman for like 5 more hours. Anyway, after they encounter this Man in Black, they actually went to Harold Dahl's house, and there was no furniture in it. There was literally no furniture in his house. That's how Coming to the Saucers ends. Spoilers. Like a ghost story. So either they skip town after this crazy UFO hoax, or maybe it's all real and they skip town, but in the book, they disappear. And I think that's super interesting. And I want to know the end of what happens to them. Where did they go? Why did this happen? Scott, take the microphone.
Okay. I just want to tell you, I got a telepathic signal from Mr. Steve Edmiston, and he said Maury Island was 3 days before Ken Arnold. June 21 was Maury Island. Ken Arnold was June 24. All right, so there, we got to correct that. And then Steve wants to talk to you about the origins of the Man in Black. He'll show you his FBI binder. He says it started with Maury Island. Pat, any more jokes for us?
No, I'm fresh out. But I actually do have, people think that I know jokes, but I don't. I can't remember them. But I do, this is my go-to joke. It's the only one I can ever remember. Before I get to it though, I noticed that when the Darrells were killed in that first episode, we presume they were killed. If you have a stalactite or stalagmite run up your butt, you're probably dead too. But when they died, I didn't hear anybody in the room going, oh, gee, that's too bad. When the dog dies, oh, no, not the dog. Your subsequent episode, the dog has to pop back to life somehow. That's my request to you, or I refuse to do Crisman anymore. So here's the joke. It's a little tawdry, but not tawdry enough for me. Two women go to a veterinary office. They've got their respective dogs with them. One woman has a little yappy dog. I mean, one of those small dogs that you could even carry in a purse. And the other woman has a Great Dane, huge dog, looks like a small pony, gigantic animal. They're sitting in the veterinary office together, and they start up a conversation. One woman with the small dog says,
well, you know why I'm here. My little fella, he's always scratching himself and things, and so I'm getting him some itching cream, so that'll clear that up, I hope. Why is your dog here? He's a big one, isn't he? Oh, yes. Well, my dog, he's a good boy, but sometimes when I'm working around the house or I'm picking something up and I bend over, he gets up behind me and he puts his paws up on my shoulders and he tries to hump me. She said, well, I suppose you're here to get him fixed. Oh, no, I just want to get his nails clipped.
Ladies and gentlemen, the comedy stylist of Mr. Pat Cashman. And the great director, writer, producer, voice talent, animator, Mr. Bryan Shickley. I'm so proud of you. You are awesome. And I guess I can take credit for it, right?